Welcome to The Advantage. I'm A-Train Bets, and I use my brain to make bets. In this video, we're going to talk about the settings page on A-Train Station. And this is where you click on here, you go to the settings page. This is where you're going to do a lot of the core configuration that's going to propagate across all of your sessions. And it's kind of the starting blocks for your betting activity. Most of these you're going to set once and you're going to change them infrequently. Some of them you're going to change more often, and we'll cover out what those are. Now, to orient you, first off, there's a few different sections here. There's sizing, which is really around your bet magnitude, the amounts you're betting, how you are showing and displaying with throughout the station bet size recommendations. That's really what that's all about. The search defaults are all about targeting how you craft your initial cut at the pregame search page. So when we look at the pregame search page, that's when you come here, you're going to set these defaults here in the search defaults section. Finally, in the details section, this is kind of our catch-all. This is where we're talking about how you are fundamentally breaking down markets and understanding the underlying market truth. So we'll talk about what those are, why you're going to adjust those a little bit different ways, and some of the new things that we have that have been added. We have recorded this video before, but we've added so many new things to the account settings page, it was time to come back and redo it. So let's start with the sizing section. In the sizing section, the first thing is your bankroll. Now, this bankroll number should be what you have available to bet with in total. And that includes pending bets. Pending bets, you expect to come back to at a roughly the same size that you have. So you don't want to change the bet sizing based on how much you have pending. That's a mistake a lot of people inexplicably make, but you have to realize that there are different kinds of assets than just cash, and a pending bet, especially one that you have positive expected value, you actually expect that to come back to you in more than what it is currently. You do not reduce your bet with pending bets. So your bankroll is how much do you have available to bet with. You can adjust this, but I generally advocate putting a true number there. The Kelly multiplier is a little bit more flexible. This is really around saying, and if you're not familiar with Kelly, this is the Kelly criterion for bankroll management, or it's technically a risk of ruin calculation. And so this came from the financial industry. We have videos on all of it. We won't go into all the details, but know that the Kelly multiplier is how you are taking that Kelly risk of ruin calculation and reducing the bet size recommendation accordingly, because this takes into account the EV percentage, your likelihood of winning, and your bankroll. So when you look at that, sometimes you don't necessarily want to bet the full amount. What we recommend is get to a bet sizing that you like, and that is kind of the max bet you want to make. If you have as much confidence as you ever have, you can make that bet at full beans, as like we call it. So I do mine pretty conservatively because I'm testing out a lot of new strategies. I'm trying new features in the station all the time, trying to learn. I'm doing it on a live stream. So I try to keep my Kelly multiplier pretty low. Most people aren't going to go below 0.15. You're going to see people with a moderate risk profile going at 0.2. People with more aggressive profiles can go 0.25 or beyond. Some people like to play with their bankroll settings or what have you. Again, these are all configurable how you want to make them, but I find that for me, I want to go pretty conservative compared to the amount of cash I have spread out across all the different books. For me, it's more about trying to make good plays than trying to maximize my return. Plus, knowing that I'm always pushing the envelope on new features of the station, my returns are going to be all over the place compared to a lot of people who are more dialed in on strategies that they know are working. For me, I've got to create the live streams, and those are going to need to have new and interesting ideas, and I'd rather test it out with my bankroll than have you test it out with yours. So once we get it working, then you can jump into it and then make your money. My job is to give you the best software. All right. Rounding bets to the nearest $5. This is what I do. You can do this down to the penny. You can do this to $1. You can do this to $100. This is something that you want to do for two reasons. One, convenience. You have to type in less numbers and it'll give you the amount rounded to the nearest $5 or whatever your selection is. And it helps hide the fact that you're using software to generate your bets. If you see, if you're a sports book, and a sports book sees a bunch of $12.13, they're going to be like, well, this person's using some sort of algorithm, and that's only going to make you look sharp. And they may say, well, they're insane, but that doesn't really matter, because if you're going to that level of precision, they're going to be watching you. So rounding to the nearest, you can always round up, you can always round down. We try to give you the fine-tuned controls the way you want to have them. All right. default arb stake. What this is the first value that you're going to see in our arbitrage calculation, because we don't do a separate arbitrage calculator. We actually do a fully integrated arbitrage calculator. We want to know, you don't use expected value in arbs the same way because you're playing both sides of it. So what we want to say here is, for me, I do $100 minimum. And so I say, whichever side is going to be the underdog, I'm going to do $100 for that. And then the favorite, I'm going to offset with whatever is higher. Now, and when you go in to actually bet, you can change all those numbers or whatever. This is just the default setting that happens when I bring it into the ARB screen. Then similarly, rounding your ARB, a lot of times people are going to round their ARBs to a more precise number potentially because they don't want to have exposure on either side. You can do it down to the penny, but it's again, similar considerations apply, especially when it comes to account longevity. If you're doing ARBs at a book that doesn't like people doing ARBs there, don't get me on a soapbox on that one. But they if you're doing ARBs at a book that doesn't like that, you want to be thoughtful about your account cover, as it's called, as well. Okay, let's move on to the search default section. This is where I have a few things that I put in. I just left them in for examples. I don't play props at BetMGM because they limit me too much, so it's a waste of my time. I can't play minor league baseball in my state, and I can't play FanDuel cards. I can't play cards anywhere, technically, in the state, but FanDuel's where they come up a lot of the time, so I just omit those as well. Okay, so this, and what the search bar is, it sets what my defaults are going to be in this search bar. Now, keep in mind, that search bar is super powerful. You can do things in the moment, like say I just wanted to have FanDuel plays. Instead of going into the books, I can just type FanDuel. And now when I run my search, only FanDuel plays are going to come back. That search bar allows us to do things that a lot of other tools just can't do. We can do it right in the screen, and it's super fast. So this is just stuff that I always have in there, and you can set whatever you like, and they can be inclusive or exclusive. Like these are ignoring these plays, so they won't show me these, but you could say, I only want to bet tennis, and only show me tennis, right? So, and if you have limited access in your A-Train Station membership, you don't need to put those in here. You're not going to see everything and then only be able to play certain ones. It doesn't work that way. That'll limit you based on whatever your access criteria are. So you don't have to worry about that. You'll be able to see that. So start with it blank and then add things as you decide is something that you need. Let's go to these checkboxes. So in the group by game, this means in our positive EV or pregame search page, we're going to break it out by the individual event. And the reason is a lot of times you're going to be playing either ladders, like in this case, there's different percentage EV, so these would be all scattered throughout. Here, we can see the ladder right up front and say, okay, well, we're going to want to play more than one of these. Let's bet size accordingly. So you'll be looking at that way. Sometimes they'll be across different books. Again, too, you can put in, here we're just looking at FanDuel plays, so we can remove that. And you see so many more plays across all these different books available on this particular basketball game that we're looking at. So that's something that the group by game allows you to attack the game more specifically. Hide already bet simply says, if I've already made the play, don't show it in this list, in the search list. So that's that. Wait by hold. Now, wait by hold, we have an entire separate video that covers wait by hold. But what wait by hold does is, let's just bring up one random play here in the bet detail screen. What you can see here is that I have a couple. I'm using a sharp book strategy in terms of my sharp book weightings. What we do here is that because Pinnacle has the lowest hold in the market, we give them the most points, and then we give other sharp books a percentage of that based on what their hold is. So there's another setting to this that I'll show you in a second that is associated with this, but this is just saying I want to use the wait by hold. So if I wanted to not use wait by hold, I'll show you here. This, I'm using the sharp POW strategy, and I'm not going to do wait by hold. I'm just going to hit it here, and you're going to see it's going to be a little bit different when I run it without wait by hold. So you can see here it's 3.37 with wait by hold, and it's 3.34 with wait by hold on. So it's really just a matter of a fine tuning, but it can make a big difference when you have a wide variance in how much hold the sharp books have. So study that, watch the other videos. Again, just giving you a heads up of what that value means. Stats alignment is another one that is pretty unique to A-Train Station. And what that says is when we select it, now in this case, I had not selected it in this. Let's run a query with this on, because in stats alignment, what this is going to be is saying our stats functionality has to align with the bet. that we're recommending. So in this case, I'm just looking for, we'll just use a first quarter total points here. So what we can see here is that Hard Rock Bet has a bet here at plus 100s calculated to a 4% EV, but it has a 75% chance over the last 10 games. This bet's won 75% of the time. Now, there's a lot more to factor in than just that, because there's different matchups, there's different values, like depending on what this value is that we're looking at in a bet market. But it's one more way to just filter to say, hey, I'm interested in things that tend to happen, right? I want them to happen by historical standards or by the last 10 game standards right now, more than what it would require for this bet to be profitable. That's a very powerful setting. Some people, as soon as we rolled that out, some people are like, I'm turning it on, I'm never doing anything that's not stats aligned. I think that may be a little bit overstated, because there's a lot of things with matchups that you're not going to necessarily just want to rely upon the last 10 games, but it is something that can be very powerful as you develop your strategy. Okay, one-way minimum EV percentage, that's the minimum EV you're looking at for. And again, videos that cover these topics, 3% is what I start with a lot of the time. Two-way is when we're looking at arbitrage. So the positive EV is our one-way EV percent. You're looking at one side of the bet market. Two-way is when we're looking at both sides. So for arbitrage. So a lot of times I want to see any arbitrage. If I'm going to run a two-way search, I'm going to be looking for plays that I can make on both sides. I want anything that's profitable. Typically, that's what I'll use. Minimum odds. We now have this broken out. We used to have this combined. It was a little confusing, so we separated it into separate fields. Minimum odds, what is the favorite side? What is the minimum I need to have? So I'll do minus 250, I'll do minus 220, but I won't do minus 300. Max odds, similar the other direction. On the underdog side, I'll play plus 150s, but I don't want to see anything above plus 300. So plus 350, I don't want to see it. So you can control that as well. Right? And we have default settings for these, so you can go in and hit those defaults and always come back to kind of safe space. So try new things, but then come back to safe space. Width is the price normalized difference between two sets of odds. So in this case, the width is 25. You see that here. That's the difference between these odds. That's price normalized. The hold percentage is a percentage normalized difference between these two odds. That's what you see here. Now, the reason we tend to like to hold, and again, we have videos that cover this in more detail. The reason we like hold is that it is more comparable across different levels of underdogs and favorites. And that's something that we think is really important to be able to look at different bets. We want to see hold consistently compared to when there's different underdogs and favorites. And so width, when you get to like plus 300, you're going to see much higher price normalized number for width. You want to be more careful about that. So you can use them individually and you can use them together. You can have both width and hold. Say, I want a 6% hold, but I'm not going to do anything that is width more than 100. Just like ignore anything that's over 100. That's going to help contain your underdogs and favorites that you're getting recommended, but it may be something that you want to do in your strategy. So they are independent. You can use them both. Most of the time, I would think most people would use one or the other, but certainly you have the flexibility in your strategy development to use them how you choose. Max days is how long from right now am I looking for events? So from right now, if it's a max day of 1, I'm looking for anything today or tomorrow up till this time tomorrow. Or if I'm going max days 14, I'm looking 2 weeks from now. I often keep that pretty high because I want to see opportunities that are coming up in the future, because early lines can often be very profitable. So I'm looking at those too. Okay, now the details section, we are in our bet detail screen, you see line movements. So you can see all these horizontal bars, and you can always click on these toggles to kind of remove some of the clutter on these pages. This is a fairly cluttered page, especially up here. But you can see, and this is a nice view of one, this STN Sports, you can see the line movement that they've had in the last over 20 minutes. Then this is within 20 minutes down to 5 minutes, and this is from 5 minutes until now. And so you can see that that line has been moving pretty frequently and certainly pretty recently. And that's something that you can set here. So you can set, okay, my most recent, that white range, you see it's in the color that we just looked at, that's a 5. And you can change that. These are the default settings, but you're absolutely able to change that to something that you prefer. And it's a great way to, on this visual, see a lot about the line movements in very one kind of pane of glass. This is something where it delivers a lot of information to you in one viewing. Then devig method. We again have video on this as well. Worst case devigging is something that I'm a big proponent of, because what it does is that devigging methodologies, and this isn't a very good one. Let's find one that has a bigger underdog. Devigging methodologies are more or less reliable. There's different ways you take numbers, the prices, and try to figure out what that no-vig line is, the true odds. Because the no-vig line, in this case is between 184.8 and 195.4. The worst case devigging kind of just stretches that, says we're not exactly sure where it is in here, because you can use different methodologies. But accounting for the weaknesses of all the methodologies, we're going to calculate the EV based on the worst of it. And that's what worst case devigging really means. So again, more details about all of this, but I generally would advocate turn on worst case devigging and never look back. It gives you the most conservative view of opportunities, and there's not really any downside to it. It just gives you more protection. It is safer to use most of the time. So don't change it unless you really know what you're doing, is another way to say that. Details, this is just an interface thing. Details opening in different windows. So when I click on here, it brings me to a new screen, right? So when I'm on the positive EV screen, I'm looking at like a collection, then I'll have this, and I can move this screen wherever I want on my actual monitor. And it allows me to have the list in one place, click on it, and have the updated results on the other thing. You'll actually see me do this in the live stream a lot, is that I have one quadrant of my screen that is my positive EV search results. And then I'm over on another half of the screen with this page more vertically oriented. And so that's what that does on the details one. Never display tutorial videos. So what you're seeing here is a tutorial video that is actually available right here in the corner. So you may be watching it there, you may be watching it in the demo, or you may be watching it on YouTube. But this is where never show the help videos. These videos show up. The tutorial videos or the help videos, these show up automatically the first time you visit a page. And it happens on the demo site, it happens in the production site. But we want to make sure you have the resources that you need to use these pages effectively. Now, finally, this is the weight by hold fall off range percentage. That's a big title for something, right? What this is, I use a 2. What this means is that when I have, and in this case, we have Sporttrade, which is a Sharp book, Caesars, which is also a Sharp book. These two have very low ratings in my Sharp book, but they're still Sharp books. Sporttrade has a 5.21% hold, and Caesars is 3.35% higher. And what the weight by hold fall off range percentage is saying I will reduce. So if Caesars had a 6.21% hold, they would be treated as 0.5 times whatever their weighting is in my weighting section here on the weightings page. So if I wanted to bring it up, I could look at the weighting section. Caesars is also a 3, just like Sporttrade is also a 3. That would treat it as 0.5 times 3, which would give me a 1.5 here if they were at 6.21. But in reality, they're at 8.56. I don't look at them at all. I only want to see Caesars calculated alongside Sporttrade if their hold is low enough to demonstrate confidence. And that's something that only the Sharp books seem to do, in my opinion, is that they will tell us how confident they are about their lines based on how much hold they're taking a lot of the time. The less Sharp books, the books that limit people a lot, they don't have to rely on their hold to protect them because they just limit people who they know are good. So they'll just do whatever they want for their hold because it doesn't have the same consequences as it does for the Sharp books. So in this case, what we can say is depending on the strategy, you might want to tweak that weight by hold fall off range percentage. Because you can make that, when we first launched the weight by hold feature, we did it for 1%. We wanted to do a sharp drop off. But as I started using, I'm like, I want a little bit more gradual. You might want to go to a 3% or even more potentially. It's up to you. One more way to slice and dice these markets using A-Train Station that most other options out there just don't have. So this is really the settings page. We've covered everything. There's obviously a reset button here that you can go and get back to the defaults. These are their current defaults, so we don't turn these things on by default. We do a 1.5% minimum EV percentage. We've got these other things like 6.5% on the hold as the maximum, minimum odds minus 250 plus 250. Obviously, these are a good place to start that will steer you fairly well to begin with, but it isn't necessarily where you're going to want to be as you get more and more experience and as you develop a more complicated strategy. The beauty of A-Train Station is that you can start simply and then build upon it. And so I know this video, help video, has gone pretty long, but there's a lot going on here, and we know it can be kind of unwieldy. This is something that we think is really important to understand, and our best way of communicating that is by recording these new help videos when the pages change enough to justify it. And so what you see today might be slightly different than what I'm doing in this video. And again, over time, we'll come back and we'll re-record the video as it makes sense. So thank you for joining us today. We will see you on the next one.